Nimisha Parekh. I am one of the Associate Deans for Faculty Development. I specialize and focus on HS non-Senate faculty. Our other Associate Dean for Faculty Development, Brian Cummings, could not join us today, but we have our other two Associate Deans of Academic Affairs, Mohammad Helmy and Kyoko Yokomori, here on with us as well. And in addition, we are very grateful that some of our expert staff from the Office of Academic Affairs is here as well. So in case if I can't answer the question or Dr. Helmy can't answer the question, we know our wonderful staff can. And so today I'm going to go over the merits and promotions process, focusing on non-Senate or HS faculty. So we will first do it. Our agenda today will be, we'll do some more introductions. Then I'm going to go over what the academic series are, define merits and promotions, and then we'll go over the review process and then just go over filling out the AP10 as an HS clinical faculty. And so I'm really focusing on that. So if you are a Senate faculty member, you can ask questions, and then we're actually doing another session next month geared towards Senate faculty. So feel free to raise your hand and ask questions, or you can put it in the chat and Dr. Helmy will moderate that for us. So as I introduced Dr. Helmy and Dr. Yokomori, we also have Dr. Abbott, who's the Senior Associate Dean of Academic Personnel, and Jamie Holland is our Executive Director for Academic Affairs. Also, we have I can see Maral, we have Morella, I think we have Holly and Tracy. Am I missing anyone? I know
Sean too is here.
And Sean too, yes. Sorry, I don't have everyone's screen. I'm not on my usual screen, so I apologize for that. But we have
April's
our wonderful
here too,
I'm here as well. Yeah.
Staff as well. So, and April, yes. All right. So I wanted to go over what are the different tracks or academic series that we have at University of California. We have inline, in residence, clinical X. Those are all Senate faculty series. Then we have the HS, clinical, adjunct, and volunteer. And those last three are the non-Senate. And today I'm going to focus most of our time talking about HS academic series. So within any of these series, we have different ranks of assistant, associate, and professor. In the HS series, we call it HS Assistant Clinical Professor, HS Associate, and HS Clinical. Within each rank, we have different steps. And so within the assistant professor, we have steps 1 through 6. Associate professor, we have steps 1 through 5. And professor levels, we have steps 1 through 9. So we do have a process for academic personnel review. It is an evaluation cycle that occurs on a regular basis at preset time points. So the normal time is depending on which step and which rank you are at. So for assistant clinical professor and associate clinical professor, you will be evaluated every 2 years. For associate clinic or for regular professor, it will be 3 years. Now, there is a caveat that if you're an associate clinical professor steps 4 and 5, that will be at the 3-year mark. And the reason is those are overlapping. So this is a really nice chart to look at as, you know, when you first started at UCI, in your letter, it will say what rank and what step you are at. And then the goal would be if you started straight out of training, you're either at a step 1 or 2, depending on fellowship and additional training. And then you'll be at each step for 2 years. Now, there is a mid-career appraisal. This is more geared towards Senate faculty, but we do a big simple one for HS faculty. And usually people will go up for promotion either between the 6 to 8 year mark, but you can't be at an assistant professor level for more than 8 years. And then we have associate, and then we have full professor. Now, the definitions are when you are going up for an evaluation, you're going up for a merit if you are staying within your same rank. So that means, let's say you're an associate professor, step 1, and then you're going to associate professor, step 2. That is a merit That is a merit. If you're going, promotion is going from one rank to the next one above. So if you're going from assistant to associate, that would be a promotion. If you're going from associate to full professor, that would be a promotion. So really, it's important to understand when you meet with your chair or your division chief that you understand if you're going up for a merit or if you're going up for a promotion. Now, everyone asks about acceleration, and I'm just going to briefly touch upon it, but it's important to remember that acceleration is an option, but you have to be doing exceptional work. And as you will see today, you have to go through, you are evaluated on 4 areas: service, teaching, clinical, and research/scholarly activity. All areas have to be really good for acceleration, but 2 out of the 4 have to be outstanding. There are 1-year accelerations, 2-year accelerations, or whole step accelerations. So for example, if you were a step 1 and you feel like you did enough in these areas and you were excelling in 2 out of the 4 areas, you could go from step 1 to step 3. Another option is if you were going up for a acceleration, if you, as we said, you go up every 2 years in the assistant and associate rank, you could go up at 1 year for an early merit. And that is also considered an acceleration. Now, this is a slide that shows what the Office of Academic Personnel, the main campus, what they require for acceleration. So it's really important to understand the bar is pretty high. And these stats are from all of the UC campuses, all of the departments and schools within within UCI. And so, but some School of Medicine data in 2020 to 2021, between both the Senate and non-Senate faculty, 17% of faculty went up for acceleration, and there was about a 57% success rate. So you can get turned down for acceleration, and you do want to be careful for just saying, well, let me just try. If I don't get it, I don't get it. There's also history on when you apply. It is also looked at how many times you're applying. So do it if you have really done the work. Now, other options, a lot of this doesn't apply for HS, but it's important to know in case you did want to do this, you can just go for a reappointment, meaning you do a formal review, but you don't increase your merits, you don't go increase your step, or you're not going for promotion. So basically, there's no change in rank or step. You can defer. That can only be done at the associate or full professor level. And then for assistant professors, you can stop the clock. And we had a lot of this during COVID. If you have personal or family reasons, this is another option as well. And you can refer to this appendix. Now, what is the review process? So there is a committee. So within your department, you would discuss with your chair in the spring, I'm up for merit or I'm up for promotion. They will discuss with you what materials are going to be needed to submit. We'll go through that. You'll submit, your department will review, they will vote, and then submit the materials to the School of Medicine. Within the School of Medicine, we have what's called the Clinical Faculty Advisory Committee, CFAC. This is a committee comprised of senior faculty from various departments. There is not a dean, division chief, or department chair that is a voting member of this committee, and they evaluate the files. So they have been training, they are well versed in this as well. Myself and Dr. Helmy also attend the committee, but we are non-voting members. Now, this is the review process. We said you would submit your review, you prepare your dossier. We're going to go through that dossier today. Then your department will review and recommend. Then it will come to the School of Medicine Advisory Committee to CFAC, and then it goes through the Vice Provost, CAP, and going forward there. Sometimes it may have to go to higher levels to the Provost and Chancellor, but most of ours will finish at the CAP level. Correct, Dr. Helmy?
Yes, I'm muted, sorry. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now, I talked about CFAC on this slide. You see these other 2 committees, ARAC and CXAC. Those are for the other series, and I'm not going to go through those today. So we reviewed this, And so for HS assistant clinical professors, you're reviewed every 2 years. You'll have a mid-career appraisal during years 3 to 4. You can be considered for promotion to associate rank typically at 6 years, but remember there's an 8-year time limit rule for promotion in this rank or in that. So that we're going to skip. Okay, associate professors. As we said, steps 1 through 3 will go up every 2 years. Steps 4 and 5 are every 3 years. And the reason is if you look at this chart, step 4, associate clinical professor, overlaps with professor step 1. And step 5, associate clinical professor, overlaps with professor step 2. So you can consider promotion after 6 years, but depending on how you are progressing. Clinical professors will go up for merit every 3 years between steps 1 to 4. Now, above step 5, there's no strict requirement for advancement, but that typically goes up. You will be evaluated every 3 to 5 years, but you definitely have to be reviewed at 5 years. And you can decide that I don't want to be reviewed after, I don't want to go up above, and you'll just stay at step 5, or you can continue to go up the steps. Okay, we're going to skip those. So what are the criteria? This is really important to understand what the criteria are, so then you can prepare your dossier accordingly. So for promotion, so when you're going from assistant to associate professor in the HS track, we would like you to have a local or regional reputation for your clinical activities. And we'll go through that on the AP10. Excellence in teaching, high quality patient care, and any type of service. You can also, if you are doing research or scholarly activity, that can also help. Promotion to professor rank, we want those faculty to have a regional or national reputation, continued excellence in teaching, highly meritorious service, and then may have leadership roles in the division, department, or in the hospital. All right, so we're going to take a brief moment here, and I will take a few moments to answer any questions at this time about what we just covered. Does anyone have any questions? You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. Dr. Naidu asked, when does a member go on to assistant clinical professor, step 5 and 6? And if you can be an assistant clinical professor, minimum 6 years, max 8 years. And I think Dr. Helmy answered someone who's brought on at a step 3, 4, or 5. They may move into steps 5 and 6 to hit their 8-year max. And we're going to go over what is highly meritorious service as we fill out the AP10. Okay. All right, then we will keep going. Oh, deadlines. When we send out this slide set, we will put the graph with the deadlines. I'm really sorry I didn't get a chance to put that in the slide set earlier today. So evaluation criteria, we are HS clinical faculty, so teaching and mentoring is very important. So having teaching evaluations, records of the mentoring that you're doing at various levels, and we'll go through more specifics. For research and scholarly activity, you can be doing you can have an independent, robust research program. You can have peer-reviewed articles as first or senior author, grant funding, clinical trials, case reports. So it's creative activities, and I'll go through that a little bit more in detail. Service, so that includes evidence of professional recognition. So if you are OC, Medical Association, Physician of Excellence, other types of service may be within your division, within your department, at a hospital committee, a university committee, to your professional societies, and then clinical competence. Okay. So what documents are needed? So we have at University of California, Irvine, this form called the AP10 Addendum, and it is the primary review file. And all the information that you're including in this is for that specific review period. And so as we said, for every 2 years, you're going to document your AP10, what you did those previous 2 years. If you're at the assistant or associate professor rank, if you're at the full professor rank, you're going to document what you did the last 3 years. Now, your CV is information about your entire career. So remember the big difference, AP 10 just for the review period, CV for your entire career. It is very important to have teaching evaluations. Usually most departments have a process for getting teaching evaluations. If you do not know what that process is, I would encourage you to reach out to your division chief, chair, or your CAO so you understand the process and how they collect teaching evaluations. For HS, a reflective teaching statement is required. Now, other statements, if it's applicable, if you're doing research, you may want to include a research statement, but it's not a requirement. Service on the different things you're doing, not required, but recommended. And then a statement on inclusive excellence and diversity is required for initial appointment, but if there's something you want to highlight that you couldn't highlight very well on your AP 10, this would be a spot where you can include a inclusive excellence diversity statement. I'm not going to talk about letters quite yet. All right. So then you're going to review. It's really important to review your materials before submitting to the dean's office. You would work with your department analyst, and they will work with the dean's office because we want to avoid and minimize delays or return a file. So it is very important to remember it's the role of the faculty member to input all the information on the AP 10 because you know what you have done. Someone will not know. It is important that you prepare your statements, provide your CV. The department analyst and the department will provide the teaching evaluations, but it's important for you to have a list of your publications as well. The role of your department analyst and the dean's office analyst is to review and make sure all the information is provided correctly and it complies with policy and procedure. So I really want to remind everyone, please fill out your own AP 10. We have heard stories where faculty said, oh, the analyst filled it out, and then they complained because they didn't include everything. And so really this behooves you to do this. Now, since June of 2022, there is a new section on our AP 10 called Professional Development Activities, and you can get reviewed in these areas, in the areas of teaching, service, and research, and I'm going to highlight that. So the AP 10 has 5 sections. So section 1 is the employment history. Section 2 is about your teaching and mentoring. Section 3 is about research and creative activities. Section 4, professional recognition, clinical competence, service activities. And then section 5, university and system-wide services. So what do you want to emphasize? As we said, you're getting evaluated in these 4 areas of teaching, research, clinical, and service. So it's really important to highlight what you do, how you do it, anything where you've won an award. And so really highlight those things. And if you're doing a lot of research, highlight your peer-reviewed publications and explain your authorship if you have grant funding or clinical trials as well. So section 1. So now we're going to actually go through this AP 10, and we'll talk about how, as you fill out these sections, I'm going to highlight specifically as HS faculty some tips and tricks. So, in section 1, you're going to include your entire employment history, the review period, as you can see on the slide. Let's say you started here in 2013, you came in as assistant professor step 2, and then as you can see, you went up the ranks, and now in this review period, it's 2021 to present, and you're an associate professor step 3. So really this material is focused on the 2021 to the present. So remember, it's just within that review period. Teaching and mentoring. So for HS clinical faculty, good teaching is essential. Remember, it does not have to be formal didactic lectures. If you are a busy clinician, you're teaching on the wards, in the clinic, in the OR, procedures, rounds, classroom, you need to highlight what you're doing. Clinical teaching includes medical students, residents, fellows. You can include if you're teaching nursing staff, APPs, any techs, medical assistants, you can include all of that. If you are mentoring students, please put that in. You may be mentoring graduate students or postdoctoral scholars. This is the section to put it in. As we said, have the evaluations on your teaching. Your department has a process to collect them. And so please make sure you understand that process. And every department has a different process. So really, I would encourage you to make sure you understand that within your own department. Your reflective teaching statement is your opportunity to discuss your teaching philosophy, your teaching style, any creative teaching methods you've developed or that you use. And it's an opportunity in case you got a negative comment on one of your teaching evaluations to address that comment and how you have made changes based on that comment. And so that is an opportunity for you to showcase. Okay, so if you are teaching a specific course where you are teaching a class, this is an example of if you're teaching chromatin, you're teaching chromatin biology, you would write how many students are there, how many other instructors are part of the course, and what was your percentage effort. Most HS faculty are not teaching formal courses, but if you are, this is the section you would put it in. Section 2, Part A. Majority of HS faculty, Section 2, Part B is where you need to highlight what you're doing. So if you're doing ward rounds, you want to include on, how many students are on the ward rounds, how many hours a day you're spending with the teaching, how many hours a week that is. If you're doing clinic teaching, you would include clinic, how often they come. If you're giving lectures like grand rounds, medical student lectures, resident lectures, or this is all for medical students. Sorry, this is still on the medical student side. Now, here, it's important to remember you don't need to list the names of the students. You just need to list the dates that you are on service, the number of students, the number of hours spent teaching, and list all the lectures you gave to students, formal and informal. So really important for you to keep track of that. Now, the same thing comes here, similar when you are, we call it graduate teaching. So Section 2, Part C is where you would highlight what you do with the residents and fellows. Same thing, ward rounds, clinical teaching, lectures, journal clubs, really include this. You do not need to list the names of the residents and fellows, but you still need to list the dates that you were on service, the number of residents and fellows, number of hours spent teaching. So let's say you're doing clinic. And, as we gave in this example, you have muscular dystrophy clinic, you have one resident who comes, maybe 1 to 2 fellows, and it's 4 hours once a week for the whole year. So that's what you would document. If you're giving a core lecture for fellowship, you would document that and how many people were attending that lecture. Don't list a lecture twice. So don't double dip. Now, Section 2, Part D is if you are teaching doctoral students, master's thesis students. Many of you guys supervise undergraduate students. So under part number 4, it says undergraduate student research supervision. So if you have a Bio 199 student, if you're involved in the UROP program, or if you're mentoring someone here, this is the section to put undergraduate students. And if there are other research supervision that you're doing, or this is the section number 5 to put that in. So this is an example of additional teaching. So here's an example just of doctoral students and then pre-dissertation committees. So a lot of this is more on the Senate side, but same thing you can do on the HS side. Here we go. So examples here under Section 4, undergraduate student, what your role was, mentor, department, did they win an award, other students that you may have mentored. If you have visiting students or scholars or high school students for summer programs, number 5, other research and teaching supervision would be the section to put this in. And then if you received any teaching awards, that would be Part E. Please do include them. Remember, this is for just the review period, not your entire career. Okay. And then Part F is if you have developed any curriculum or teaching innovations. So let's say you developed a handbook to help your residents. You could include that. Let's say you developed an SOP that would help them on clinical rounds. That you could include here. If you did a podcast, this would be the section to put that in. And then part G is the new one where we talk about professional development activities related to teaching. So if you attended a workshop, a lecture that was related to making you a more effective or better teacher, this would be the section to include it in. So for those who are new to the system, remember every year you are, your first year you are attending the graduate medical education seminar that usually occurs in the fall or the spring, you would include that in this area. If you've attended any of our monthly on Monday faculty development workshops as it pertains to teaching, you could include that here. If you attended a workshop at your National Society meeting, this would be the area to include it in. And then part H would be diversity activities related to teaching. Please do not include any names. You can say that you served as a committee member, as a mentor, you helped with presentations, but do not list names here. Okay, so before we go on to section 3 about research and scholarly activity, does anyone have questions about the teaching section of the AP 10? All right.
I would just add, when you mentioned don't double dip, what we're
Yes.
referring to is you may give a lecture in which the audience consists of medical students, residents, and fellows. Choose which section you want to list it in. So you can list it either in the medical student education or in the graduate resident fellow education, but we prefer not to have it listed twice. So see where maybe that lecture might be more impactful in terms of, spacing out your contributions and list it there.
Yes, thank you. All right. I think we have another question. Does this also apply to Bio 199 course versus mentor? Dr. Peterson, do you mean in the sense if you are a mentor for Bio 199?
You had mentioned to list it under the courses, but then again, you had it listed under the mentoring.
Okay, right. So the
It's
spot,
a different.
right, that's a good point. So for Bio 199, if you're a mentor for a Bio 199 student, so it's usually an undergraduate student research supervision, I would include it under section 2, part D, number 4.
Sorry, so you can also list on the section, the first section for the course, because Bio 199 is a course.
But it's really the same thing. They're doing the same thing. So that's why I was questioning that.
Yes, so you can put it either in this section under the course, part A, as a course, in that you had one student and what percentage effort, or you can put it in this section if you're going to list a specific student and what your role was. So you can place it in either one, but don't place it in both.
All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
I would add one small nuance to this also. It's often the case maybe where HS faculty are not the principal instructor for a Bio 199 course, and there are multiple Bio 199 students. So I may not be the instructor of record for that Bio 199 course, but I may mentor and supervise Bio 199 students that are under my colleague's course. So that might be the exception where you would list it under part 4 or item 4 here, but you would not list it under courses taught.
And also I should clarify, for the record, I think people are listing twice. So they could list Bio 199, how many students and who you are the PI. And then also you can list the actual names of the students here. I think the difference is that those are the courses and then this is actual mentoring. So yeah, in a way, maybe it can be double dipping, but that's what people do. So I think for now it's accepted.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the confusion. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to go on to research and creative activity. And so I want to remind everybody on HS, clinical faculty publishing, case reports, review articles, book chapters, development of teaching materials, website content are considered creative activity. Many times when you think about research, you think of traditional types of research, but this section is about research and creative activity. And so do remember you can include all of these at that. And now, if you have peer-reviewed articles, it's not required, but it would be, you know, it can be used if you want to put your H-index, your eyesight, or your impact factor of the journal. And it is important to report if you are the first author, senior author, or the corresponding author in this section. If you have extramural funding, or if you have investigator-initiated clinical trials where you're PI or sub-PI, this would be the section to put it in. We talked about teaching materials. You can also put this under teaching as well. So you want to see where it's going to be more impactful for you. If you did development of website content, grants, and current. Now, let's say you have a current research protocol that you have IRB approval, you're recruiting patients, but you have no presentation. So this is a section where you can put it in your research statement that I'm in the process, I'm collecting, it's not published yet, but you are doing research and creative activity during that review period. Okay, so some examples. You would put where you are the author, obviously you put journal articles that are peer reviewed. You could include invited reviews and book chapters that are peer reviewed, case reports that are peer reviewed, any commentaries that are peer reviewed. Now, it is important to stipulate if it's peer reviewed or not. You want to separate out original research from review articles. You want to stipulate your role. And if, let's say, you are a middle author as part of a collaboration, it's important to explain your role and the degree of contribution. I think probably the analyst on call would say where we make most of our mistakes are the numbers here have to match those in your CV. So this is where some of us run into problems where they don't match and the file gets returned. Does anyone have any other further comments on this? Any of the analysts want to comment on this to help out the faculty? Any tips you guys may have?
I'd just like to add that the numbers shouldn't change between reviews, so they should remain consistent from review to review. Okay.
And that's why you have your CV, and it's important to keep a copy of that CV. Thank you, April. Okay. Okay, so skip the top part, but so if you had publications and creative activity previously submitted in a prior review, this section is only used for promotion. It's not used for merit, and it's used for advancement of step 5 up to step 6 and promotion to above scale. So for majority of this is not an area where you want to pay as much attention. Now, other parts of creative work is, let's say you do artistic or professional performances or exhibits, you can include something here. If you are part of a completed part of larger works that was published, this is an area to put that in as well.
The only other exception would be for mid-career appraisals, where the review period for the MCA is longer than a merit. So there may be some things submitted in 1 or 2 prior merit cycles that would resurface for an MCA review.
All right. So other things, let's say you produced, a video. Section 3, Part D, professional online or system resources produced or maintained. This is the area you would put that in. Let's say if you have any intellectual property, patents or copyrights, you would include that. If you have any grants or contracts for either clinical trials from foundations or NIH, this would be the area to include that in. I would work with your department team to have the correct amounts and the date of the award. Okay. once again, if you have other allocation of other non-financial resources for research. Now, once again, section H, professional development activities as it relates to research. So let's say you went to a training for NIH boot camp. This is where you would include that. Let's say you went to a training from ICTS. This is where you could include that. If you attended a monthly on Monday workshop where it was about how to start a research lab, this is where you would include that. So list all the creative activities there. And then as we go to diversity activities as it relates to research and creative activities, if you did research in an area looking at health disparities, this would be the area to include that. If you have a publication that includes a minority diversity student as an author, you could include that here. If you have a grant or clinical trial that focuses on health disparity, you can include that. Remember, diversity is viewed very broadly. Categories include ethnic background, gender identity, socioeconomic status, first-generation student, military veterans, disabled populations, just to give a few examples. It's not an all-inclusive list. Okay, now, before we go to section 4, any questions on the research section? Okay.
I think there's something in the chat.
There was a question in the chat, yeah.
Okay,
So-
do you guys want to read it? Let's pull it up.
Dr. Kim was asking if one is not the primary author, is there a next best author to be, second versus last author? I can give my input and then Dr. Yokomori, Kyoko, if you want to chime in as well. But generally speaking, first author and then final author as pertains to one being a senior author are the most impactful. Final authorship does not always denote senior authorship, but if one is the last author, ideally they would be listed as the corresponding author, for example, to show that there is a level of authority on the subject matter. I think second authorship, I don't know about the Senate side. I'll ask Dr. Yokomori to chime in, but lots of times you may have a very junior level trainee listed as the first author, and it may be reasonable to indicate if you are the second author after a junior trainee, that is the case, because that does show your position in terms of deferring to a trainee as the first author, but that you still maintain a high level of contribution and a high authorship position. So, but I'll defer to others too to see what they think.
Also, I just wanted to say, if you're junior faculty members, you really want to show some of the papers you're a senior author, meaning that you're showing taking a leadership role in the project. So that's really important when you're going up for promotion and also for higher merit increase. And then also, if you're in the middle, the multidisciplinary research, you could explain your critical contribution, to give a context.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. It's from Dr. Iyer. It was, if you create a lecture and then those slides are used as ongoing reference for residents, does that only count for teaching, or should it count for creative work that the residents are using?
So I think, again, most of that at face value would be more under curriculum development or teaching materials and resources. So I'd be inclined to think it would fall more under the teaching scope. If one is developing teaching materials and new educational paradigms and can publish on that teaching style, I think that it tips over into the creative and scholarly work from the standpoint of being educational research and maybe, educational techniques, right? Or teaching techniques. So if it's more material that's developed for a course and it's being used over and over, then I think it's reasonable to include under teaching. If it's a new approach or new protocols or new series or new ways of teaching that are more innovative, then potentially it could fall under the creative activity.
Perfect.
Also, I should add that the peer reviewed or not is really important for the creative activities. It's much more valued if the materials are peer reviewed. So that's another consideration.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to section 4, professional recognition and activity. So this is the section that's talking about some of your service. So you would include honors and awards here. If you got an award for your high level of patient quality care, media coverage, let's say there was a news story done on you by KCAL 9 News, you would include it here. Memberships in professional societies, participation in activities and committees of professional societies and organizations, if you're on an editorial board, if you do manuscript reviews, if you do grant reviews or study section. Let's say you had an invited lecture at UCI or other institutions or other departments or professional meetings, this would be an area to include that. If you have an accepted abstract poster at professional meeting, community service outreach activities, mentorship of other faculty, and board certification. So it's a lot of different things. So let's go through each section. So section A, honors and awards, pretty self-explanatory. Remember, it's during that review period. So please do include that. If you become a fellow of your society during that time, include that in there. Also include your memberships of all the different professional societies that you are a member of. So that's section A and B. Section C would be your professional activities. So the first part is invited presentations at educational, governmental institutions or similar organizations. So let's say you were invited to give grand rounds at the University of Michigan. This is where you would include that. Or you are a speaker for one of the research seminars, let's say for research day here at UCI. This is where you would include that. If you have an invited presentation at a professional meeting, either regional or national, then you would include that. If you had a poster accepted, then that's under accepted presentations at professional meetings. So that's where you would include all these. Let's say you're working on a case presentation with a medical student or a resident and it gets accepted, you would include it here. Let's say you have other presentations at professional meetings. So let's say you were invited to give a talk on or a presentation. I mean, it can probably fall in one of these others, but if you're unsure if it doesn't fit the typical, then I would put it here under other presentations. We talked about media appearances and interviews. So list anything that you have during that review period. If there's a link, put the link in there. And describe your contribution. So if there's a news story about your work and your patient, include that. If there's an article that talks about your work, provide a brief description. If you have it available, provide a link to that as well. Now let's talk about professional and public service. So service to professional societies or outside institutions. So let's say you are the committee chair of the Women in GI Committee, for example. This is where I would have you include it. Let's say you're on the Social Planning Committee for one of your organizations. This is where you include it. If you are invited to be on the Congress Planning Committee, you would include it here. If you're a journal editor, membership on journal editorial boards, this is where you would include it under Part D. Okay. You would then include more review. If you do review of manuscripts, you would say what the dates you did it, what title, what you did, the journal. If you are a standing member of review boards for funding agencies, this is more like NIH, but let's say for American Cancer Society or any foundations. If you've done any ad hoc service of proposals, you would include that. Now, let's say you're doing some consulting for either industry, government, or whether it's paid or unpaid, this is the section you would include it in. So let's say you sit on an advisory board for a device company or a pharmaceutical company, you can include that here under consulting activities. If you're doing any community service or outreach, so let's say a lot of departments and programs are doing a lot of pathway programs for high school students, and you are going to talk at the high school about careers in medicine. This is the area you would include it in. And it could include high school, elementary school, secondary education. And then any professional development activities related to professional and public service. So If you attended a workshop like faculty development series, we had a communication and interpersonal styles webinar. If you attended a faculty or professional development series on building better curriculum, if you attended a workshop on better managing your career, this is the section you would include it in. Once again, diversity activities as it relates to professional and public service. An example is if you sit on the Minority Affairs Committee and what their goal is, and include your role in that. Okay, so that's section 4. So remember, section 4 highlights your professional activities, and a lot of it is focused more on other outside institutions and professional organizations. Now, section 5 is dedicated to what you're doing at the university. And so for a lot of HS faculty, remember that may be division and department committees. So if you sit on your PEC, CCC, wellness, DEI, educational committees, curriculum committee, this is the section you put it on. If you are on a hospital committee, this is where you would include it. If you interview medical students, or you're contributing to that mission, you work on an advisory committee for the dean's office. If you have cross collaboration committees for improving care on patient matters, this is where you would include it. UC campus-wide means more if you're working, let's say, with the School of Nursing, School of Arts, if you have an administrative role. University-wide is more across the entire UC system. If you're in the office of the President Advisory Committee, let's say you're an EPIC liaison for the UC system. If you're a department chair, division chief, a director, other leadership roles, this is where you would include it under university. Now remember, less service is expected at the assistant professor level. More service is expected at the associate and professor ranks. Okay, so examples of university system-wide, the Cancer Research Coordinating Committee. We talked about campus committees, we talked about school committees, department as well. And these are just examples. And sometimes it gets confusing on where to put it. And so let's say you do faculty, if you're on a faculty search committee, that would go under department. Let's say you are on a search committee, on a chair search committee, then that would go under the school. If you're working more on campus, like radiation safety committee, you would include that there. Professional development activities as it relates to your position, leadership academies, training programs. This is another area to put that. And then once again, diversity activities as it relates to the university. What we wanted to show is, there are different ways you can show the work that you do. Just to say you supervised 5 underrepresented minorities and 7 female students, that doesn't give a great description of what you did. It's better to write, out of 15 trainees in my group or in my training, I had this many in my direct supervision, 5 were URM, 7 were female, to achieve this level of diversity, how you did that, what opportunities, what was the pathway, and how you did that is good to include. Okay, and then remember, do review all your materials. Make sure you go over it with your department analyst before they submit it to the dean's office. We want to ensure less delay and fewer returns of files. So that's really important. So I think some tips I would recommend is that you keep your CV up to date as you complete activities and provide contributions. And what I recommend actually is doing kind of your CV and your AP 10 simultaneously. So anytime you do something, as we saw, put it on both your CV and your AP 10. So that way you don't have to try to remember what was what. So, every month when you're on service, just put it down on your AP 10, how many students, how many hours. Just do review the material for accuracy. Incorporate emphasis on diversity, inclusive excellence in the contributions you're already making. And as I said, really work closely with your department analyst to adhere to the timelines provided. Here are some helpful websites. We will have this presentation on our Office of Academic Affairs website, so you can watch the recording if you need to as well. You are free to reach out to myself if you have some specific questions and you're not sure, if your analyst is unable to help you. So I want to thank you all for coming. We do have a few minutes left, so we can open it up to questions. You can turn on your mic or you can put it in the chat.
Dr. Parekh, I want to clarify one thing if we go back a few slides under the service categories. I think if we are looking at things that are, for example, a department chair is serving at the discretion of the School of Medicine dean. So probably that contribution would be listed under School of Medicine.
Okay.
Division chief would be serving under the chair's discretion or direction. So that would be listed under department level service. If there is a line of service, for example, that transcends multiple departments, I do think that that would be appropriate to put under School of Medicine. And then similarly, as you mentioned, if we're doing inter-school collaborations between, nursing, public health, for example, School of the Arts, humanities, then it would be reasonable to put that under the campus-wide.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you.
One of the questions that comes up often is, where do I put med center committees? For example, if somebody's on a medical center committee, I encourage people to put that more under School of Medicine, because it really has more to do with the health enterprise at this point. It usually transcends a department. If you're doing a service for the medical center that's beyond your department, I think it's reasonable to put it, under School of Medicine there.
Here's a question. What about if someone's serving on IRB?
So IRB has its own category. Dr. Yokomori, is it usually at the campus level, right?
Yeah, that's a campus level because
Yeah.
it's across different schools.
And then there was a question earlier about what is considered highly meritorious activity or service activity.
So I don't think there's any one specific thing that makes it highly meritorious. I think it's what you're doing, what your role in it is, and how long you've been doing it is what I would say. Or Dr. Helmy, do you have another opinion?
No, that's exactly right. So the idea first, the principle is, when somebody's at the assistant level rank, we don't want them investing a whole lot of time doing service and compromising the other elements of being a great teacher, contributing to scholarly work, and being an outstanding clinician, right? So the service element takes a little bit of a backseat, but it shouldn't be zero. I think as one moves from assistant to associate to full professor, that level of service expectation goes up. So it needs to be more highly meritorious at the full professor rank than at the assistant rank, for example. And to quote one of the people on one of the advisory committees, you can sometimes tell when somebody's just checking the boxes or dialing it in, when their service activities look like they're a bit rudimentary for somebody at the professor level. We expect them to be more engaged. We expect them to be doing more mentorship, more involvement, being more willing to volunteer for activities. So I think that's what's meant by the higher expectation at the higher ranks, basically.
So for the senior level, for example, serving as a chair of the committee, showing some leadership is important.
Does anyone else have any other questions that we could potentially answer? Hopefully this was helpful for all of you. It gives you some guidance on how to fill out your AP10 and what to expect during the merits and promotions process. And our goal with this is really to make it more transparent what the process is, what you're evaluated on, so there are less surprises. And it helps you prepare your dossier as well. So if you have specific questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me. Just email me and we can set up a time to talk as well. But I want to thank you. Thank you to Dr. Helmy, Dr. Yokomori. Thank you to our wonderful Office of Academic Affairs team for joining on the call and being here to answer questions. And thank you to all of you who spent the time to join. And please encourage your colleagues who are not able to join to watch the video because files will be, that whole process will be starting this spring and deadlines are coming up in the summer and the fall. All right. Thank you very much. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.